first grew curious about the paranormal. Dare you dig deeper? You are listening to Hounds of Asher.
And welcome to this special Christmas episode of House of Asher. I am your host, Steve Asher, and hope everybody's doing well. I know it's been a real kind of crappy year. We're kind of waiting on to see what's popping with these vaccines. I'm a little scared. I'm not going to lie. I'm not anti-vaxxer. I'm not whatever. I know some vaccines have really jacked people up, and also I know it's cured people from polio. So there's that. That's the margin I'm in. I'm in that, okay, in time, I've seen this has worked. Okay, I've also seen other vaccines that have not worked as well and have been somewhat detrimental to the people taking them. So there's that. But again, this is Christmas episode. So you're going, okay, well, what are you going to talk about? You're going to talk about the Ghost of Christmas Past, something like that. You're going to talk about some sort of thing about Christmas Island or something weird. Well, not so much. Not so much. I do remember this, and I'll tell you this before I get into the meat of this. Right after I thank a few people, I need to make sure to thank Parrot UK Radio, the guys that have this show going worldwide. I am in their debt. Sweet people. Sweet as pie, as we'd say here in the South. Also, you may be listening to this on the YouTube. I'm like 90 on YouTube. You may be listening to us a link off of Facebook. You may be listening to it on Spreaker, which is the mother recorder that I do from here. There's iHeart, iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud. Every little nook and cranny of it that you can think of, it's there. You can also access some of this through steveasher.com. That is my homepage for my books and for my shows and for any other little wonky things I feel like sharing and putting on there. As always, some of you guys may or may not know, I am an enthusiast. I love doing what I love, and that entertains me. Be it the paranormal, haunted places, goblins, ghosts, fairies, spooks, parallel dimensions, time portals, things out of time, things that should not be in a time frame, and they find it in strata that's 200 million years old, and there's a wristwatch or something. I mean, yeah, I know a lot of it's BS, but what if some of it isn't? You have to keep an open mind if you don't want to just go through life punching the clock. Okay, I made 150 units today. Cool. Can I go home and try to sleep? What are you doing tomorrow? Going back and doing it again. Yeah. If that's the life you want, cool. Have at it. But this is a way for some of us to live vicariously through stories and events and whatnot. Okay, I'll tell you this. Christmas time. Being in a small western Kentucky town, obviously a lot of it revolved around church and things like that. But my mom was pretty cool. She was pretty groovy. She was from like the Appalachian Mountains, and she saw things differently. Hill people see things different. It's just how it is. And we would watch and read about all kinds of different stuff. Some of those things I mentioned before: spooks and specters and haunted castles and all this and that, and all these different weird things that's happened. One of the things that people don't think about Kentucky is the amount of just strange aerial events. You could call it UFOs, you could call it what you want, but definitely have had some strange things happen. And there are some different things. We've had I think it was like January 7th around 1948, 1949 in Fort Knox, Kentucky. There was a young Captain Thomas Mantell, who was a pilot, and he was from the Gotham Army Air Base, and he went to investigate what appeared to be a massive circular object. It was very close to the town of Madisonville, Kentucky, which is maybe 35-40 minutes from me. Anyway, different people saw this thing and said it was hovering at about, or well, it was estimated the size of about 300 feet in diameter. Okay, metallic, definitely reflective, had a weird gaseous trail, sort of a greenish yellow mist, and one person even said that it looked like it descended before shooting upward to its original height and speed greater than 500 miles an hour. That's pretty darn quick. Clouds don't act like that. Seagulls don't act like that. Weather balloons don't act like that. UFOs act like that. So apparently the young pilot took off in his F5 1D Mustang, and it was just boogieing and got higher than probably 25,000 feet before he blacked out. You know, even trained pilots, you give it your all and you just fight those G's, and that's what happens. Now, he crashed his plane. I think it come down around Franklin, Kentucky, in which the object took off and disappeared and all that stuff. But the crazy thing was, he was talking. He was connected to the base by, the radio, and he was actually talking with people at Scott Air Force Base. This is in Illinois. Now, he had claims that the person working the radio, that he heard Mantell say, "My God, I see people in this thing." That's a trip. That's really weird. You don't have people in hot air balloons. Now, of course, you do the famous, these were air test dummies or whatnot. Well, air test dummies are going to go 500 miles an hour anyway. But amazingly, the young captain survived his situation. Luckily, it was just very, I guess, minimal damage. It's very unusual, and it's kind of a miracle he survived. Now, another one I want to talk about. This, I've actually been able to speak to the lady who is a descendant of this family, Miss Geraldine Stiff, and it ties into the Kelly Hopkinsville Goblin story. This was 1950s. This is right in the thick of some of that. Of some of the UFO stuff. And this was, I think, August 21st, and this was around Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Also about 30 miles from me. I'm more or less in sort of a triangular connection between all this different stuff. So anyway, this was kind of blown off. This is a small town just outside of Hopkinsville, and there were 5 adults and I think 7 or 8 kids that were there, and they were traveling carnival workers, carnies. Okay, and I say that with all due respect. I'm not using it as a derogatory term. It's just what people called them at the time. Anyway, they had said that they had been attacked by about a dozen small entities, creatures, they described them. Part of the description was that they had claw-like hands, kind of emaciated, thin, spindly legs, glowing yellow eyes, and also had large pointy ears. Okay, that is how we're tying it in to Christmas. Now, take away the glowing yellow eyes and the creepy hands. Elves are, some elves are kind of thin, some kind are chunky, whatever. Elves, by nature, you think of Santa's elves, but also classic elves were very thin, large pointed ears. That's my hook. You're welcome. Merry Christmas. But according to that family, that they were fighting these creatures, shooting at them, more or less to fend them off from their property best they could. But it said it didn't have any effect on them. It's just like it almost made the sound of like when you shot against like a tin can, sort of just bounced off of them, a la old time Superman serials. But there was actually an investigation. The local police came but said they could not find any real evidence of these creature or goblins, as they, I guess, had come down to calling them. thing was the family was very, very disturbed by the incident. That they even packed up and left in the middle of the night. And when supposedly the creatures returned. And apparently there had been a couple different incidences dealing with this situation. And it's such a famous story that the Kelly community actually does on the anniversary of the event, the third weekend of every August, a thing called the Kelly Little Green Man Days. And this is one of these things that I know Geraldine, Miss Stiff, takes very seriously. I have seen some of the photos related to this. I've seen, oh man, the hand-drawn descriptions from the family. I've seen the screen doors and the bullet holes and the whatnot. And supposedly there was other evidence that had to do with markings on the ground and things, but the cops kind of just, some crazy old carnies. What are they talking about? Maybe they were drinking too much of that moonshine. That's what some of the papers coming out of like New York and bigger cities were having a real good time with all this. I look at these hillbillies. They're out here having a good time, sipping some juice and seeing shooting stars. Anyway, it made for good tabloid magazines, but it really left a mark on these people. And the fact that you go through some and no one wants to believe you anyway, it's a heck of a way to try to make it. But another story I was going to tell you about, there's an area called Florence, Kentucky. I'm not super close to that, and this is way back in 1974. It's an area called Big Bone Lick. Insert joke here. A lick is more or less like where lakes and things come together, like salt licks and things like that. Anyway, there's a spot around the Big Bone Lick State Park, and this is up in northern Kentucky, and talked about seeing weird orbs, erratically moving lights darting back and forth above the area. One woman, even at that time, mentioned witnessing a mothership. So now, her description of what a mothership, if you don't know, I'm doing air quotes, mothership. It said it was more or less the size of a football or larger, and this happened when she was a teenager. Now, some years later, this woman and other people had collaborating evidence that they also had saw strobing red, green, orange lights dancing over the treetops. And more or less, they said shortly after, they observed a silver flying saucer with 3 windows. Even put a motion-activated trail cam on the back of her property to try to capture these black and white images. And there's actually some images if you look it up. I believe it was KentuckyForKentucky.com where I got these pictures, and feel free to check them out. Great place to go, especially if you're just interested in weird things that happens in the Commonwealth. But these are freaky. They're kind of freaky. They don't really look like insects, but they do leave kind of a sweeping tail. It's freaky. I don't know what it is. It'd make me weird. I'm already weird. It'd make me feel weird. But there it is. The other one that I actually did a show on this, the Stanford abduction. Okay, the Stanford UFO. And this was still in the 70s. A lot of crazy stuff popped off in the 70s. January 6, 1977, or 76, I apologize, Stanford, Kentucky. And this is considered one of the most credible of all alien abduction stories. There were 3 women, went out to dinner in Stanford, and they were driving, I guess, back home from it, US 27. They were cruising down the road, and what they saw, they thought it was like an airplane on fire. Man, can you imagine that? More or less falling, ripping through the sky, coming down their way. But for whatever reason, the objects just stopped, like just scotched still, less than 100 feet from the ground beside them. Now, the women had claimed something caused the car to accelerate uncontrollably, go back to like Close Encounters, definitely kind of the same sort of vibe. And they could see what they described as sort of a dish-shaped craft, and it had lights that seemed to revolve and kind of maneuver behind them. Now they're still in the car, and they began, and it began pulling the vehicle toward it. It was almost like it had a tractor beam on it or something. Uh, and they actually said that there was a light that filled the car. I believe it was a blue light, blue or purple. I think it was blue. And what next thing they knew was they were back on the highway, driving home. They were confused, and like more, it almost felt like they had been subject to sun lamps. Almost like to get kind of like a suntan in wintertime, or solar beds, or what, or solar suntan boots, or what do you call it? So anyway, it freaked them out, and they had somehow lost like an hour and a half of time. Nobody could account for it. There was also reports at the time of UFOs and other strange encounters. Well, as the months went on, different investigators put these women through all kinds of tests, polygraphs and whatnot, which they passed. There was never a doubt that these women felt they saw what they saw. Okay. Understand a lie detector or a polygraph, or a polygraph is not a lie detector. Polygraph is to measure stress, to measure if you're trying to be get away with something, or you know that you're not telling exactly something truthfully, and it will show a however marginal reflex in what you're saying. It'll show like a little I'm getting a little ding on that. I don't know why that is. But they even went so far as to go like under deep hypnosis. I'm talking like flat, where you're asking you questions and whatnot. And all of them had the same story of touching on being taken aboard the craft, the UFO, put through rigorous physical examinations by these small, little, large-eyed creatures with hands like jagged wingtips, little tiny, and they didn't say a word. Apparently, one of them claimed that they were put inside of a glass capsule where a skin sample was taken from her chest. Christ, that's insane. That would give me a heart attack. I wouldn't. They could put me on the ground, but I would be dead as a rock. Supposedly, one had claimed, oh my God, that they had their eye temporarily removed from its socket and replaced. Like, I guess it just sort of laid there on the side of their cheek. Now, they had different symptoms from all this. Like I'd mentioned, the burns, freaky eye inflammation. I guess you pull your eyeball out, that's going to happen. And it was all consistent with what they claimed and what happened, on whatever side they said the eye was is the side they say this was. Now, there's another thing that happened in where was it? Central Kentucky. This is actually around the Fayette, Madisonville County area, and it was called the Bluegrass Triangle. And the region got that due to the fact that the firemen had come out to put out a fire. Okay, someone said there's something in the woods and it's burning. It's there's a flash fire. There's a this fire. There's a that fire. So they went out there, and it turned out it was a glowing flying saucer, and they went after it. They pursued it probably like an hour and a half. That's just one incident. There was a gentleman and his wife, I believe he was a preacher, mentioned that the craft was about 10 stories high and 20 stories wide, with the quote, with a zillion lights on it. Now, they said it approached their car while they're on the way to church and miraculously avoided a wreck or being crushed by whatever this thing was. But again, there's no way to explain it. There's pictures of that people have taken of some of these large crafts. There was a kid named Terry Kirby around that time when he was out chopping wood, happened to have his camera and caught some of this stuff, and it was close to the I'm trying to remember what it was. I think it was a Bluegrass Army Depot. It was very close to that, and there was never any explanation. The government never said, "Oh, well, this has happened because of we were doing crafts and whatnot." there's actually an interesting thing that was in Weekly World News years ago, and take it with a grain of salt, but there's been other people to collaborate this. They picked it up after the fact. I think the headline was UFO fires on Louisville, Kentucky police chopper. Two cops survived most amazing encounter of 1993, and this is around February 27th. And it was called the Louisville UFO dogfight. I am writing about this actual event among some of these ones that you mentioned. I wrote some in my Curious Counties from Kentucky book, and this story will be in the More Curious Counties from Kentucky. It's a volume 2 of that. Well, more or less the thing was, this is before drones and a lot of that stuff. So there were some police pilots, and they took out their helicopter for routine patrol. This is midnight-ish, obviously going to have some traffic, but it's not going to be that bad. They were up and going, and what they supposedly encountered was a glowing pear-shaped orb. It was about the size of a basketball. Now, that's maybe not very impressive, but it seems like the orb would coming around, circling, ascending, like up above it, like 600 miles an hour, and dropping down, circling it again, like it was studying it. Now, this thing took off. Then the orb reappeared, circled the helicopter again, and when the pilots tried to evade it, gave chase. Okay, this is according to the pilots and witnesses on the ground, where the UFO shot 3 baseball-sized fireballs at the helicopter and disappeared. Shooting fireballs. I believe, I'm trying to remember, I think the pilot was Kenny Graham, and Kenny Downs. The pilot's Kenny, flying around together. Anyway, but this thing took a shot at him. It was pretty freaky, and I would want no part of it. Another one was the Painesville UFO train crash. Yes, train crash. UFO hit a train, y'all. This happened around January 14th of 2002 in Painesville, Kentucky. And there was a train. It was hauling a bunch of coal and different freight through Painesville, Kentucky. It's a rural area. Trains are very big in that area. It was on its way to Shebania at about 2:47 a.m. Weird lights appeared down on the track ahead of them, and suddenly the train's electronics went haywire. They love jacking with electronics. Now, there were about 3 other hovering craft that seemed to be scanning the water with searchlights. Now, these particular UFOs described as metallic with no windows or visible openings, almost like it would what you would think of as a drone, a UFO drone. And the diesel engines lost all its power and was able to stop quickly enough. It struck the closest UFO on the tracks. It hit the UFO. Now, after reporting the incident, the crew was instructed to bring their damaged engine into the yard in Painesville. Now, witnesses described being greeted by an army of workers immediately tending to our train, while several people in weird outfits rushed about. First of all, I would have loved to have heard that conversation. Bring. Yeah, main yard. Hey, we had like a little thing happen. Yeah, what's going on? Well, we hit something. What do you mean you hit something? Oh, God, is everybody okay? Did anybody hurt? Yeah, the train's beat up a little bit. What'd you hit? You hit a pole? Hit a cow? Got loose? UFO. Come again? Yeah, we hit a UFO. Yeah, won't you bring it on into the yard? So, anyway, word got out, and apparently that's when the government got involved. And here they come in here, they're looking at the damaged carriages, all those ones that were removed and placed under a large tent, and it was quoted, buzzing with activity, as they were pouring over them like ants, trying to look at, get any information, get any sort of samples and whatnot. Well, there was a lot of questioning going on, and the workers were transported to Martin, Kentucky, and then allowed to return home. Now, by this time, there was not any really trace of an activity in the yard, and the public was told that the entire incident was due to a, air quotes again, rock slide on the track. Last I knew, rocks don't fly and glow, but there's that. I think it was CSX train that hit it. It's freaky. You can actually go to YouTube and find this. Let me see here. I'll run over this real quickly, and so we can kind of get through some of this. I don't want this to be too long an episode. Bright hovering tubes, October 16th in Pike County, Kentucky. They talk about things that were looking like two large fluorescent tubes side by side, parallel, shining very brightly. And it would be so bright they would seem to merge, and you could see it very clearly with the naked eye. Then it would dim down to almost invisibility. It's unlike anything that they ever recognized. It definitely wasn't a plane or a copter or anything like that. So now, some people have said it has been explained as a test flight of a solar-powered internet balloon. But why did no one not know that at the time? What's the story on that? It just makes you wonder. There was a sighting in Paris, Kentucky, October 20th, 2012. And again, this is the middle of the day. There was a circular patch in the ground left about 14 feet in diameter. Soil was discolored. There was a strange orange tint to the rocks in the center. Just strange. Strange things like that. There was a story about what called repeat visitors, and it come down 16th to the 25th in February of 2013 in Falmouth, Kentucky. And objects would come traveling east, or from east, traveling west and southwest. This was around 11 p.m. on one of those nights, and they kept coming back, and they appeared as bright stars until you see them move, and they would have multicolored lights, red, green, and blue, yellow, white, and they would leak randomly. And one of them appeared on the tip to its side, revealing a round disc-shaped bottom with a ring of green lights rotating around the object. So that's freaky. Louisville tends to have a lot of stuff. On September 19th, 2016, relatively recently, had what they called a UFO fleet. There were several UFOs that went across the sky, followed by a small fleet of smaller UFOs traveling in a tight formation. You know, it's strange. It's really odd, and people think, Kentucky's like a hee-haw episode or Joe Dirt or something. It really isn't. It's just crazy tons of stuff going on, and I can't explain it. I've seen a few oddball things. I've heard a few oddball things, but there's that. Last one I will mention talked about radar blips. This was December 11th, 2018, Western Kentucky. This is right over Hopkinsville, Kentucky, one of the towns I mentioned beforehand. There were large storm-like radar blips, almost like you'd think it was like a weather formation, that appeared mysteriously over Western Kentucky. Now, the National Weather Service could not explain the abnormality because it wasn't raining at all. There was no precipitation anywhere in the region. Now, to make this even more intriguing, was the blip's proximity to Fort Campbell Military Base in the city of Hopkinsville. I call it Hoptown, which is known for UFO activity. A unnamed pilot pilot claimed that he was told by Evansville, Indiana Air Traffic Control that the blip was a result of a military aircraft releasing a stream of chaff, a radar jamming material sometimes used to obscure training exercises. But, that being said, none of the military bases that were nearby had any knowledge of any such exercise being conducted on that day, so we have to call BS on that one. There was the Easter UFO chase, 2019, in Glasgow, Kentucky, on April 21st. There's just tons of stuff, tons of crazy stuff. And my question is, have you seen anything in the sky? Have you seen anything weird? What is your explanation? Do you have an explanation? Do you have a theory? Do you have a really weird, freaky UFO encounter? I don't want to sound like a Jerry Springer episode, but have you been abducted? I've even heard people supposedly having children with aliens on their abductions. And I don't laugh about it because that would be horrifying to lose control of your body like that and more or less being used like a petri dish for a possible hybrid or something. Believe it or not, it's an interesting story. So, but what I want you guys to do, I want you to go out there, have a great day, Go out there, do your little shopping. Please do your social distancing. But as the sun sets behind the pines and the shadows grow long, make sure to look under your bed, behind your closet, beneath those Christmas trees, maybe up the flue of your chimney. There may be a fat man with presents, or there may be elves, aka goblins, coming to see you this holiday season. But don't be afraid. It's okay, because there's knowledge in fear. But until next time, my friends, please remember to stay